Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I am Heidi Ferguson, and this is Fidesta Ramsey. And tonight we have Janice Solomon on as our guest for the second time. So I went back in our archives, and I was like, when was the last time? And so she was our first guest, as you know, that we had on the podcast, and it was 3 months ago. So anyway, welcome, Janice. And as Fidesta and I have said many times, our friend with the best laugh ever. And as we are conversing tonight, you will hear her laugh many times, I'm sure, which is lovely, and we love it. So anyway, so Janice and I have been friends for at least 5 years, I think, right? And I would say for me, the two of you have been my consistent friends throughout this whole time, the whole pandemic. And that I'm really appreciating. And I just want to say that out loud for those who are watching, for those who are struggling in building relationship and having friendships. I get that it's not easy. And so I just wanted to bring that forth and say that you two are my constants, which I'm so grateful for and appreciative of. And so I think, 3 months ago when I introduced Janice, I will share a little bit with you about her. She's a a homeopath, and an incredible homeopath who is knowledgeable not just about health, but about food. And I would say for me, that's been very supportive. I'll share about that a little bit about that later. And she is a mother of 4 beautiful children and 2 wonderful grandchildren. And yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. So I don't know if you have more to add to that, Janice, but feel free, or Fidesta, if you have anything to add about Janice, go for it.
I do. I think the place I'm most tickled and still curious about is this, that moment when you brought the pelvis into frame and just reminded me how much, as a woman, I may be less conscious of the lower half of my body and how grounding that can be for me. So just like some beautiful, magical, I'm almost going to say ancient wisdom that you bring. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm a little, there's a Yiddish word, verklempt. Barbara Streisand does a whole funny piece about you just get a little like overwhelmed. I think that might be what it means. But anyway, thank you. I think I just want to add in addition to what you said, Heidi, I do holistic healthcare. And I created a body of work called Finding Your Feminine Core, which has a lot to do with that coming into that pelvic area, that area like below the belly button, that just to sink into those lower chakras and stuff. And yeah, so I just wanted to add that in. And I've always loved food. I had this dream for a while when I was younger that I would do like a cooking show. And I kind of have been doing that now with this In the Kitchen, which is another program that I've kind of swung off of some of the work I do. And I get to play and be in the kitchen with people. It's really fun.
Yeah, and so I'll piggyback on that a little bit. So several months ago, as Janice was putting In the Kitchen program together, she asked me if I would do a bit with her to we talked about fats, right? Oils and fats. Mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of fun. It was really easy. It was very just kind of back and forth, engaging. And what I realized in that, I guess it was about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, there was so much that I didn't know or that I thought that I knew and was incorrect. Because I think in the world, we're given a lot of false information, unknowingly given a lot of being told and taught a lot of false information. I'm like, oh, okay. And so what I found interesting is that as you were teaching, because it was a very, educational hour, I was like, oh my God, like she, not only is she so knowledgeable about this, but you have a way of educating and communicating to, I want to say, your students, client students, that is very easy to understand and digestible and fun, because it's very it's very, what's the word I'm looking, fluid. Very fluid. Yeah.
I always like to say that I'm sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you. Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun. All right, I'm gonna laugh soon. So there goes, right? My laugh. Yeah, I have been told by many a person that my laugh is quite I don't even know the right words to say.
My
It's
curiosity,
say it
sorry,
again.
I was gonna say my curiosity is what brings up that bubbling laughter for you. Like, what is that for Janice?
You know what? I can only say that I know that even from a very young age, I probably learned to laugh, to deal with tension in the family, what a lot of us do in relationships. So you go into laughter. Well, some people will go the other way, they might go into anger, other people might go into sadness, but I think I figured out how to laugh and be silly and clown, probably clown-like a little bit. Pretty young, pretty early on. And I don't know, it just sort of, that's my laugh. Whatever, sometimes things aren't really funny, but I will laugh anyway. That's just like but for the most part, I can laugh easily. Maybe need to learn a little more to laugh at myself or with myself. That might be a good one. I think Heidi teaches me that a little bit more.
I was gonna say, I think you do that more often than you think you do.
Yeah, maybe.
I think you do. Yeah. So anyway, we invited Janice back on tonight because something that came up for the two of us a couple weeks ago, we had a little bit of conflict. And so, Fidesz and I spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about relationships and how to maintain and build and trust. And we talk about all the elements. And we've talked about conflict, but we really haven't the two of us haven't had a lot of conflict. I mean, anyway. And so when this happened between Janice and I was like, oh my gosh, what a great opportunity to share with people, not only the way that we do conflict, but also how we resolved it. Right.
Right.
So, and I brought this to Janice, I talked to her about it, and she's like, yeah, I would totally be open to that. So anyway, which I'm really appreciating, because I'm feeling very vulnerable right now, because I know that I'm going to be sharing a part of myself that I might not like to see. And maybe the same for you, I don't know, but that's just kind of where I am. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna, like, fuck it. This is me, warts and all, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, let me just kind of like go back and see where, okay, so one of the things, actually, it's probably been the thing that has been the piece that's been most contentional. Is that even a word?
Yeah, I think so.
I made it up.
Contentious, maybe?
Contentious, yes, between the
Something
two
like
of us is you're not being on time.
Oh, yeah. Just get right in there, Heidi. Don't fool around.
Right? Okay. So let me back up a little to say that Janice and I meet at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, and we do what we call witness meditation. So we mark about an hour and a half on our calendars for this time, so it's uninterrupted. And every time we meet, at the end of our hour and a half, we schedule the next time. And if there's a schedule conflict, we text and we're like, yes, let's be flexible around that. So, and I always send the Zoom link. I know, I'm getting really hot. I send the Zoom link and I'm like, okay, this is when we're meeting, right? We have it already set up. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and and this has happened a few times. So, you know, sometimes she could be 3 minutes late, 4 minutes late, whatever. And I grew up in a military family where we had to be on time. And if we weren't on time, we were left behind, literally left behind. So we didn't even play around that. And so I realized with Janice's grace, she shared with me, you know, that I might have some rigidity around that. And that'll come up in a little bit. So anyway, so in this one time we were meeting and I was struggling with, it's after I came back from my mom's from doing some caretaking with my mom. And I think it was like the day after, 2 days after, I don't remember, but I was really tired. I was just exhausted, but we also hadn't connected in a while. And I was really looking forward to it. And I just thought, okay, so I can put off a nap, you know, until we're done. Like I can do that. And you were with a client and you did text me. You just said, give me a minute. I'm with a client who's kind of in crisis. Fine. And I also knew that it wouldn't be a minute, it would be longer than a minute because a crisis takes longer than a minute, right? And so anyway, I waited a little bit, I waited a while and I realized that, you know, I was getting more and more tired and I just said, okay, let's reschedule. And then you texted me back something along the lines of, I'm upset that I was not allowed to be 15 minutes late. And I read that and I was like, is she kidding me? Like, who would be okay with being 15 minutes late? Right? But that's how I read it. I was like, really? And then anyway, so I think we decided to meet the following week. We did end up meeting and I was having a lot of kind of inner angst and all this anxiety going on. And so the first thing we do is we check in. We always do a check-in and kind of catch up and whatever's going on for us, that kind of thing. And Janice is like, hi. And I'm like, hi. And she's like, do you want to check in first? And I'm like, sure. So I just kind of launched into it. I just said, well, I think we have something to clean up here, which we did. And one of the things that I have learned, and also from Foresta in a really graceful way, is that there are two sides of the street, at least two sides of the street. And I have to clean up my side, and the other person in this situation, Janice, has to clean up her side, right? And so, so anyway, we talked about this, we had some dialogue, and once she understood where I was coming from and that I was really tired and still recovering from my mother's, she was like, oh, now, you know, now I get it. And then she kind of like the fuse, you know, the air let out of the balloon kind of thing. And in that discussion, I didn't even know what my side of the street was. And I said, and she's like, well, what about, you called me on it. You said, well, what about your side of the street? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So I'm going to ask for your support and for you to tell me. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment and see if you want to kind of.
Okay. Maybe this should have really been a cocktail. No, only kidding.
Maybe, yeah.
No, I don't drink. But anyway, that's bad humor. See, that's what I mean. Like that could make me laugh and it's not funny. But anyway, all right. Woo. As you were telling it, I'm like, oh my God, we're like completely going back into that moment, which is important. Yeah. All right. So I feel like a little background for me is I did not grow up in a military family. I actually grew up in a family where my mother was pretty much chronically late, very, very late, to the point where it was really an issue. And so being late or not on time or timely, or at least letting someone know that I'm going to be late, is something I've spent many decades working on. So I thought I was good. Like, oh, I'm running late. You know, like for me, that felt like that was a big step forward, as opposed to experiences I had growing up where, you know, waiting for an hour because there were no text phones, texting or anything, you couldn't know. So I was a little taken back. Anyway, so that's interesting. We come from very different backgrounds around time. which I think is just interesting as a topic anyway. What is time? You know, some like man-made construct, like what is it? But that's a whole different conversation than tonight's. And the thing that I remember from this conversation is also that in what I felt like I needed to explain, what it wasn't landing on you. Do you remember this? And then you said to me, I feel like you're not hearing me or not listening. I forgot which one. That's another one of those interesting conundrums, hearing versus listening. And then it boiled down to the fact that what you really needed to hear, the essence of what you needed to hear, were 3 words. I am sorry, period. And as soon as like you said it to me, that's what I needed to hear. I heard you, I listened and I heard you, and I said it back to you sincerely, not just I'm sorry, you know, like when a little kid's like, I'm sorry, you know, no, this was a sincere I'm sorry.
Right.
And that was what I remember when everything just,
Yeah.
like you could literally palpably feel that energy shift in that moment.
Yeah.
And it took me back to some of my earlier years parenting and learning how important and a technique it is to actually be able to say you're sorry to your children, which was really in contrast to the generation I grew up in, my parents' generation, which is like you never apologized to your children, you know? It was like, I'm your parent, not your friend. Anybody else heard that topic?
Yeah.
I'm sure someone out there is going, yes, I did. So to learn that, and then to see how much that keeps applying in life, that it's one thing to make an explanation, it's another thing to just say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're actually both important, because you can get the pat, I'm sorry. And you know, you certainly, like, I imagine like my children and one of my grandchildren just like, I'm sorry. And you know, they're just trying to get out of it, you know.
Right.
So anyway, that to me was really crucial of what happened. And when you said the word vulnerable before, there's this part of me that I'm completely not even registering that it's not just the 3 of us, and that there might be other people right now listening and watching this, you know.
Right.
Because talk about feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
But what I feel is the reason we could actually do this is that we built up trust and safety over several years. And there were other moments that were very challenging to them. And then of course, our continuing practice and connecting, right? And to be encouraged and supported to let myself be vulnerable. That's not so easy.
No.
At least for me, it's not. I wonder about you two. Do you have troubles with that?
With saying I'm sorry?
To be vulnerable.
Oh, to be vulnerable. I will say it's something that I have to consciously work at, and a muscle that I have to consciously exercise all the time.
Right.
And I will say it's a lot easier with people that I trust.
Yeah.
I'm very picky and choosy about who or whom I, can do that with. But it's, and I will say the more like practicing with the 2 of you or doing it with the 2 of you, for me is relatively easy.
Right.
And maybe 1 or 2 other friends, depending on how deep they can go.
Right.
And I would also say vulnerability is something to me that I'm only going to feel safe doing is if the other person also shares that level of
right.
Reciprocates that. Yeah.
Suresh, I saw you unmuted and then you muted, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it.
I'm just like, vulnerability. Like it's the answer, and it's so crunchy sometimes. I think in my friendships, similar to Heidi, like really having been selective and discerning in who I share with. But it's hardest at home with my partner.
Mm,
There's the vulnerability hangover is real, of like, oh gosh, I showed an insecure part, or a part that I'm a little ashamed of, or a part
mm,
that like I'm still working on that's kind of messy. That kind of vulnerability when I'm struggling is much harder for me
mm.
to be seen in than the kind that's just like authentic truths that I've worked through, healed through. I don't want to say I'm over, but I'm
Yeah,
on a good wavelength with. I still have a really hard time being messy.
I know, right? And I feel like as you're saying that, I'm so relating, and I feel like I'm almost like a broken record when I say these type of statements, how much that has been inculcated into us, that this word vulnerability equates weakness, messy, um, whatever. There's a whole slew of them, you know, and it's gotten a bad rap
Mm-hmm.
culturally. I don't think it's just being here in America. I think it's just culturally across the board. And I don't think it's just for women, just for men. I think it's humans.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, so, and then the feeling of safe and trusting, and then is it okay to even be seen in this messy self,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Not all, oh, I figured that it's okay, here, I can tell you this. So when Heidi and I were, not only this one, but other ones, we'll just talk about this moment. I'm like, I thought I had my whole timing thing clear, and it felt fine to say, okay, I thought it was all nice and clean. Mm-mm-mm. No, it really, because it really wasn't about being on time or not being on time. It was really about just being able to say, oh, I'm sorry, that hurt. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing particularly neat about or thought through about that, other than to just realize that it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
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 Well,
And
I was saying it's the leading with empathy, right, and curiosity, and in couples coaching and stuff. When with my training there, it's like, how can you validate and empathize versus justify and explain and whatever? And you could have incredibly valid reasons, right? This happened, that happened, the car
right,
cone, and blah blah, like whatever. But in that moment, it's about tending to the other person's feelings.
Right.
It's not about the content per se, right? The person just wants to feel seen and, hey, I was impacted over here. And
right,
sometimes I say to my partner, like, I was impacted and I know it's irrational. It has nothing, like, it doesn't make sense to us, but it's how I'm wired or my history. And being like, and I was impacted, right?
right. And if you think about, like, historically in our own lives, going back to this idea of I'm sorry, like, when was that ever said to us in those formative times of our life?
Right.
And from the most emotionally powerful relationships, meaning our parents, caregivers, maybe siblings, maybe close relatives, whoever, but let's just, keep it simple. So it really does feel like, talk about the muscle that you have to learn how to first identify, let alone start moving and exercising and practicing with it.
Yeah.
And we demand it, especially of children,
Right. Right.
say you're sorry. What does that even mean?
Right. So if we would mirror that back to ourselves, what would that look like? You know? When I say that, like, as I say those words out loud, I'm just like, oh my God, that's really scary to think about. What does it mirror? What am I saying? Because if I'm saying that to someone else, I'm actually saying it to myself. Say you're sorry. Like, And in that tone and in that way, it's a very shameful. Say you're sorry, like you've done
Right.
something wrong, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that goes right back to what you said, Freshta, about in that vulnerability, feeling perhaps shame or,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like one of the things I've learned and understood in probably more in my practice as a homeopath is just understanding more about human nature, personalities, and how early in our lives these patterns and these like we've been doing the Don Miguel 4 agreements, the agreements get set. It's before we're conscious.
Right.
These by the time we're 3, they're set.
Yeah.
So this whole topic of being vulnerable, being able to admit that you made a mistake, saying you're sorry genuinely, man, we have like lots of unraveling of patterns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They get crystallized and
Decades of unlearning for sure.
decades of unlearning.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the first time you do it, I'll say in that experience between us, it's so simple.
Oh,
It was so simple. Once I got what it was, I was like, oh,
yeah.
I really am truly sorry. And it's so immediate, the shift.
Yeah.
And I think the part of having an ongoing relationship, practice, keep building the foundation of trust and safety, and when it gets a little scritchy, doing it again. So we resolved that in less than a half an hour, if I recall.
Yeah, we did. We were.
Whereas in the beginning of being friends, I remember one time it went on for weeks.
Yeah. And I was like,
I did my retreat and she did hers, and then we, and then you get on the phone, it's 2.5 hours, your head's about to, blow up because it's like, what?
So you two have gotten efficient, it sounds like.
We've really gotten efficient. Yeah.
We've practiced.
We have
skills.
practiced.
Yeah.
So what I did, I wanted to share a little bit more about what during that moment. So after Janice had apologized to me, she said, well, she said, what about your side of the street? I am paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly. And I said, yeah, I don't know what my part is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to need some support with that. Cause I couldn't see my shit. I couldn't. And Janice very gently and gracefully, she's like,
I don't remember this. Anyway, yeah.
You do?
I don't.
You don't? She was like, well.
That sounds like me. Well.
You're a little rigid when it comes to time.
Mm.
And I was like, it was like 57 years just flashed, and I was like, she's right. I am really rigid when it comes to time.
Mm. Mm.
And I'm also very judgmental when it comes to time, like people being, how dare you? Like I have all this shit around that. And I realize it's mine to own, but it's also stuff that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The
and
military growing up, right?
The military growing up and being afraid that I'm going to be left behind and all that. So yeah. Anyway, so the reason I brought that up is because for those who are watching our beautiful, wonderful audience, if you've had a situation like this where you are working on conflict resolution and either one person or both people need some support in understanding what they need to apologize for or whatever, share that with them from your perspective, because it is from your perspective. And it's all okay. And yes, it's hard. These are hard conversations to have, but they're so doable and so important. And it's so much better than being like, I'm just not going to be friends with that person anymore. I mean, how many times have I done that in my life? A lot of times I've done that in my life. And I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Mm. I'm a grown up. I can do this. I can do hard things. I can have these conversations, even though they're not comfortable. Yeah. And So by me modeling that, I hope that I'm modeling that for other people, right? Like that's really important too, that so that if we're living a certain way, that our behavior and our actions show others that, oh, okay, she's going to meet me here. I can meet her and then we can do it together.
Right. Yeah. And I also believe that, well, a couple of pieces. First of all, I really, what you said about modeling, I think is so critical. So if we're modeling it, and then maybe someone's watching this or this conversation opens up, so then that gets shared with someone else and someone else. And ideally, this is what I feel, is that it keeps moving down in age so that it gets to the parents of the young children.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets to, you know, the teachers and all the other, because really, I mean, I felt like I started to learn it in my 30s, but I feel like I'm much better at it now and I'm in my 60s. I mean, I don't want it to have to continue on that. I think a critical aspect of where we are in life and history and humanity is all this wisdom. Like, let's keep bringing it in so that it goes to younger and younger people, so they get it sooner.
Right.
Some things are hard. It takes time. I get that.
Yeah.
A certain maturity and whatever. But on the other hand, these really are just basic concepts of how to be
a human being.
A human being. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold young people sometimes are far more connected to that emotional intelligence, that body intelligence. How do you feel inside? You know, how is that for you? Can you trust that? You know, can you speak that? I've noticed in my work, at least with like teenagers, that they can really almost seamlessly connect to that in a way that some adults have suppressed.
They have a lot, we grow layers. Right, that's part of the patterns. It's like, there it is. So like, if we're going to talk about like rigidity as an example, right? So it gets harder and harder and harder, you know, or the escapism, you know, like, no, I'm just going to take off, you know, fuck it, it's too hard, right? So you get really good at that. You get faster and faster at taking off, you know, so you have less and less patience. Whatever it is, we just increase it. So I do agree with you. Teenagers, young people, young adults, young children are very, if those patterns and those behaviors haven't gotten so set, they are much more fluid and capable. And there's a lot of it more in today's generation anyway, younger generation. And then just add in these pieces, what it really means to genuinely admit you made a mistake and you're sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna hold in that there's also this place of distinguishing between personhood and behavior. Right? We defend our personhood a lot in those fights, right? I want to be seen in my goodness. See me, like I meant well, like all that stuff, which is true. But the other person just wants to be seen in that behavior impacted them in some way that wasn't great for them.
Yeah.
Right? And the more, it's like, I know why I defend, right? So if people can even get in touch with, what shame am I trying to avoid, or what am I trying to be seen in that now this person doesn't feel seen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what you two, when you genuinely are apologizing, is going, oh man, I don't want to have you feeling that way. That sucks. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if it's one thing to do something with not intention to hurt. It's a whole different thing if you're doing something with intention to hurt. Then you're being abusive.
Right.
But, you know, going back to, I just want to think about something you just said. I was thinking it was like, about the personhood, right? It's, you know, that line, I love you, I just don't like what you're doing, or I don't like what you're saying. That's a good one, right? Because it's, you know, I think what part of the patterning that we've learned is, if you don't like it, or if you're angry, if you're hurt, if you want to be apologized, whatever, then no, it's all over. That's the escapism, right? That's I'm taken off, which I think has so much to do with why we have such not diversity, divisiveness and polarity, is because it's no. We disconnect with that inner, light, love, that it just connects all of us. We're all humans.
Right. Right.
That's tough. Like, for us to do it as
Mhm.
friends, and with an established
History.
and a whole complex structure of commonalities and learning about each other and all kinds of things, right? So I could say, yeah, I could do that. To drop into that level of vulnerability with someone who I might have much less in common with, and or history, and just to be able to say, wow, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Whew, that's challenging.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And when I think about those 3 words, and if humans would say those words a little more often, for whatever reason, the healing that can happen
Mm.
is, it's mind blowing when I think about that.
And you're
Right?
thinking, I'm sorry, I am sorry.
I'm sorry. I am sorry, and mean it very genuinely.
Right.
Yeah. And we were talking about generations and how things have changed over the last 100 years or whatever, but certainly before that. And I'm thinking about my own family, my family of origin, and my mom was the youngest of 13 kids, and her she really wasn't even raised by her mother. She was raised by her older sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there have been rumors that my grandmother was kind of a bitch, and like she was really she ruled the family. Like, she had a husband, but she ruled the roost, right? As a woman would do. And but she did it kind of with an iron fist. Like, she was very hard on the kids, and demanded a lot. But she also knew that for a farm to survive, for a family of 13, 15 to survive, someone had to do that, right? And so I'm certain she never apologized for a damn thing. I know she didn't, right? Because she probably not only didn't have time to, but it wasn't even a conscious thought.
No.
So to know that my mother was raised by someone who she probably never heard the words "I'm sorry," I'm not surprised. Like, for a long time, I was a little resentful, and I was like, God, I've never heard. But she just didn't know. It's not what she learned. So when we talk about generations, and thankfully things are changing. Thankfully things are changing. But my God, like I'm no longer like, I'm less inclined, let me say I'm no longer, because that's not 100% true. Let me say I'm less inclined to blame her for a lot of that stuff, a lot of history, right?
Right.
Because that's a whole other conversation, and but for me, that's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you brought that up, because going back to this idea of patterns.
Yeah.
So you talked about this military family, but now you're putting the next generation, you said your grandmother ruled like an iron fist. Talk about another way of experiencing rigidity. And you can be sure you had to get up and do your chores. There wasn't like, you didn't have a choice. If you weren't up at 5:30 when the rooster's crowing or whatever woke you up,
right,
you were going to get kicked out of your bed and get going.
Right.
So again, that timeliness, and how when that came up between us, like, I don't have that in my background at all.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if I go back enough generations, probably 3 or 4. Of course, everybody was farming and agrarian, I believe is the word, right? But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So it's, whew.
Yeah.
So
well, Podesta, you've been kind of quiet, and I mean, I appreciate your listening and everything, but I just wanted to give you some space.
I can own I have a hard time interjecting if I hear lots of ands. I don't know, like, sort of like where to jump rope in.
Okay.
So I'm navigating that on my end. But I think I'm sitting over here kind of fascinated by the conversation you two are having as well around I'm sorry being enough, because I don't know that that's true for me. So I'm kind of,
Mm.
I'm sitting over here with like, I'm sorry doesn't do it for me.
Mhm. What does do it for you?
I agree, by the way. It's not enough for me.
Yeah. I think at the end of a conversation, as a real like balm for the heart, totally works. But as the only thing or the main thing, um, what works for me? When someone can share my shoes and really go, man, knowing what I know about you, knowing your history, knowing where that's a wound for you, it so makes sense
Mm.
that completely, set you, paralyzed you, shocked you, whatever. So it's really just going, I'll step into your shoes for 30 seconds
Mhm.
and take everything I know about you as a human and how you're wired and your nervous system and just literally say, makes sense that you feel that way
Mhm. Yeah.
because of my behavior. And I'm sorry, I think is beautiful though too, because I think I've hungered for those from past relationships. I wouldn't say no to one, but I was like, am I okay with I'm sorry? It's like I don't know. That other piece of like I took a moment to think about who you are and what impacts you. That to me actually builds trust and intimacy.
Mhm.
The
I agree.
repair, the reattunement.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I would say the I sorry is kind of like the Band-Aid. And then the actions going forth are the repair.
Yeah.
And maybe words added to the I sorry, like I can see how you feel that way. I appreciate you feeling that way or whatever. But also for me, actions going forward, 100%. Because if you're talking the talk and you're not walking the walk, sorry, but like, fuck you. That's how I feel.
Well, I'm with you. Like
Yeah.
compassion without right
It means,
action is horseshit.
it
Like,
means nothing. It means nothing. Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
action. I like that one. Compassion without right action. Mm.
right? Then it's like, cool, you get it, but it's not integrating.
That's the word, integrating. Yeah. And that's probably I think in some ways that could be in my life, that could be one of the most frustrating pieces of relationship. So there's that moment where, yeah, the acknowledging, getting into your shoes, really understanding what's being triggered or sensitized, truly apologizing, and then when the next situation or whatever, because there's always another situation comes up, it's as if nothing happened.
I hate that.
That's really that charges me up,
It really
because
charges me up too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could admit and say, oh, I know this is not something I'm good at yet, that I mean, it's more than familiar, I'm not good at it, but just be almost like, then it feels like gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
If the person then says, oh, really, that's what you need, and I'm like, wait a minute, didn't we have that whole,
Right.
ooh, now talk about dropping safety.
So, right. Yes. Trust just flies out the window. Yeah.
I just learned really clearly, I've always been hearing borderline, 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 what these terms mean. That's actually a lot of borderline. It's like you get it, you get built up, and then knocked it.
Yeah.
So I agree, Fresha, like that. I'm sorry. That was part of sort of like, for me, like an awakening when we had that dialogue, is that's what you needed in that moment. I thought my clear explanation, kind of where she could give a shit if I got into her shoes in that moment. I don't mean make you spit your water out, but honestly, that did not, it's not that wasn't important, but no,
Right.
to know that you were heard, it was that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like on some level, that's part of that younger part of ourselves. It's like we really needed that.
Yeah.
I know me, I definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the validation piece, right? And also,
Right.
too, I think, I don't know if either of you, I know I've been on the receiving end of this recently where I'm upset with a friend and just wanting to be seen in that, and I get the 18 reasons, and it's like, wow, so it's still about you, like, right? And that's really hard because, again, I've been that person too, being like, oh, but this, and I'm like still here and I'm really committed and I'm a good person, right? It's coming through those defenses.
Right.
But to be on the receiving end of someone's justifications
Mm,
versus their validation that, like, yeah, okay, that wasn't cool. I can literally feel like the simmer go to a boil.
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my God, on top of this, I have to listen to this shit. Like, I don't know. To me, it feels misattuned, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't validate each other's feelings, we're not being relational.
We're not being relational. And I feel like that's probably, if you were to boil it all down, that's really what's missing. How to be relational. It's like we're all sort of in these parallel experiences and doing what we're doing, but are we actually in relation? I remember a therapist, whew, okay, I'm gonna say this. I remember a therapist said, you can either have mutual masturbation or you can actually be making love. Like it's either that parallel experience, yeah, oh, I'm having pleasure, or you're actually together.
Right.
That's relational, right?
Right. Yeah.
I love
So,
that.
right? And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah. Something wrong with, believe me, self-pleasure or in, if that's where you're at. But I'm just saying the idea of relation,
Right.
what does it mean to actually connect and really feel into the other person's heart and be able, and I think that's really, Heidi, what happened between us was I was all in the, well, I did this and I did that, and then I did tell you, and it's the thing that makes me crazy. Mike, I remember my daughters years ago saying to me, Mom, it's not always about you. Ugh. So
God, I love it.
you're not in relationship with anyone but yourself when you're doing that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think just holding too that people might be struggling from their stuff, and also to hold it with that empathy, but also hold it loosely too.
Yeah.
Someone just might need to go through whatever, I might be struggling one day and like thirsty and tired and run around, and my partner's like being like, uh-oh, what's going on? And it's just like, I'm just like struggling with myself for a minute. Like that's all that's,
Yeah.
Right.
right.
I'm just hangry. Give me some food. Let me have a little time and I'll be fine. Right. I love that word, hangry.
Yeah.
Whoever coined that was brilliant. How did you guys start doing this? I'm sorry. How did you first of all, how did you start doing this? And why do you call this Cocktails and Pajamas when none of us are in pajamas and no one's drinking a cocktail that I know of? I don't know what's in your cup. Mine's
Heidi,
tea.
you want to take this?
No, we're both drinking mocktails, aren't we, Fedesta?
Yeah.
Because we're both on cleanses. So yeah, I'll take this. So Fedesta and I met 4 years ago, 3 years. It's been a while.
With Janice, right? At the
Janice at that.
We were trying to think about that. I think it's 3 years ago.
And we really connected. And I would say, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months later, we became friends on Facebook. And then maybe 6 or 9 months later, one of us reached out and we were like, let's have a tea date. Let's have a coffee date. So we met on Facebook. Did we do a Zoom or did we do Facebook? I can't remember.
I don't know. I also think you visited Janice. Like there was all of that happening.
That's right. I visited Janice and we saw you in Piermont that one time, right? But then we started having coffee dates and whatnot. And then they just became more frequent. And and sometimes that was in the morning. And then when we would meet in the evening, we were like cocktail hour. I will say, when it gets dark, I get into my pajamas earlier than I would during the rest of the year because why not? So anyway, we started having these really wonderful, beautiful, long, deep conversations. And it went on for several weeks. And I was like, this is a podcast. Like this is podcast material. I think people would be drawn to it and want to listen to it. And so, anyway, so, I at least was sitting in my pajamas often and having a cocktail and anyway, so I was just like, what would be a catchy name and it just came so easily. Yeah.
My mind was like, so do you wear different pajamas each time? And then we got like the flannels and the negligee. I mean, this is where my mind was. And I was like, and what kind of cocktails? Like, I was so literal.
Janice is going to be our art director. I love it.
I just like had such a whole funny spin on it, in my head. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, I don't drink, so should I make some kind of mocktail and should I put pajamas on? Because I have all different kinds of pajamas. The other day, she's like, no, it's okay.
I think as the darker months come in, maybe we'll bring it back. But one thing I wanted to highlight was we thought, when the pandemic started and Heidi reached out like, oh, let's check in with each other every 2 weeks or, whatever. And then it seemed like 4 years happened in 2 weeks. And we're like, maybe we should meet every week. So again, just the support system and having a dynamic setup of like, let's change this. Okay, maybe we check in twice in a week when things were just like so cuckoo, right? Yeah. But we also allowed for it to be what it needed to be. We were responsive to the times, I think.
Yeah.
Very
much so. Yeah.
And we're both on cleanses, so there's been no cocktails. At least for me, this is week 3.
No, I'm like, no. I'm drinking. This is actually my seltzer water. Yeah. Thank goodness for seltzer water, or my Soda Stream. Yeah, but so this is week 48, right? This is episode 48.
I think so.
48. So we're coming up on a year at the end of October. I can't believe that. That is mind blowing.
That's an accomplishment.
Thank you. Yes, we're really pleased and proud of ourselves for keeping up and being consistent. And as we put out there every week at the end of our hour before Chat Pack, we, if anyone wants to sponsor, if you want to reach out, feel free. We would love for whoever wants to do that. If you want to be a guest and you feel like you have something that you want to contribute, or if there's a question you want to ask us, put it in the comments. We're happy to, respond to that. And am I missing anything? Am I missing anything? Okay. All right. So this is our Chat Pack question for, this is the last day of September 30th, 2021. Okay. What is the best purchase? Hang on, there's a motor. What is the best purchase under 100? Is that 100? Yes, I'm sorry. What is the best purchase under $100 that you've ever made in your life?
Under $100.
Under $100.
Best purchase. Whoa.
Do you have one, Podesta?
Well, I have a very huge affinity for those G2 gel pens because I write every day all the time.
Okay.
And as silly as it sounds, like having the flowetry of that kind of pen is like everything. I kind of go a little crazy if I don't find one because then I'm like, oh God, I have to use a regular pen. And that sounds awful and hard for like writing pages and pages. And the other thing I was going to say is my grow boxes, because I just love having eggplants and bell peppers and basil and things on the veranda that it just makes it, I marvel every day. So that feels like such a win.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Oh my.
If you don't have one, I can go.
Go ahead, you go first, because I have several. Maybe I'll get.
Okay. So I recently purchased some artwork, And yeah, and I'm really appreciating it. I have it, and it's a bunch of different little pieces. I have it around my apartment, so I've been loving that.
Will we get to see it at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I can, yeah, I mean, we'll FaceTime sometime, and then I'll take you around my apartment and show you. Yeah.
Janice.
Oh my goodness, I have so many different things in my head. All right, so the very first thing that popped in my head, I'm very big into getting clothing from consignment and these type of stores, and I found this. I was almost gonna run and get it. This really cute leather jacket with like this little furry collar, and I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
someone. I'm not someone who will. I don't like to. I never have bought a fur. One time there was a fur cuff on something. Okay. But anyway, the point was I kind of like the idea. It was already made, it was already born, and it was this cool thing. And at the same store, I also got this incredible wool. I don't even know what you call it. It's almost like boiled wool. $25 for something that was probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It was made like in Austria or something, long, cream colored. Like I love white cream. So it's funny. I first went to those type of things. And then, oh man, garden stuff. Oh, there's so many things. That's a good question.
Mm.
Yeah, I have a favorite pen. I mean, there's so many things in there.
Yeah. I only needed one.
I'm sorry, I can't limit myself. Wow, I'm gonna keep going in and thinking what's the best one.
It's okay. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Janice, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. That
so
was
much.
wonderful.
It's been wonderful having you as a guest for our second time, and yeah, thank you, and we will see you all next week. Bye everyone.
Bye bye.